My name is Bethany, I'm 32 years old, and I'm standing outside the Sterling House restaurant in Boston on Christmas Eve, staring at a text from my sister. The message confirms a dinner reservation for 12 people. 12. My family hasn't spoken to me in 8 months, not since I got promoted at work. But now, suddenly, they want to reunite for the holidays. I should have known something was wrong. I walk through the heavy oak doors into the warm glow of candlelight and immediately see my entire extended family already seated at a long table, expensive champagne bottles already empty, appetizer plates scattered everywhere. Nobody looks up when I arrive. Nobody smiles. Nobody waves. The only person who acknowledges my existence is the waiter, who approaches me with a tight smile and asks quietly, "Are you the one handling the bill tonight?" Before we dive into what happened next, I want to know where you're watching from right now. Drop your city or country in the comments, because this story crosses all borders. Family drama is universal, but I want to know I'm not alone out here. And if you've ever felt used by the people who are supposed to love you most, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you haven't already, because I share real stories about real struggles. And trust me, you'll want to hear how this night ends. Now let me take you back to how I got here. To this moment where everything I thought I knew about my family was about to shatter. 8 months before that Christmas dinner, my life changed in a way I never expected. I was promoted to senior marketing director at the tech company where I'd worked my tail off for 6 years. My salary jumped from $55,000 a year to $120,000. It felt like validation, like all those late nights and sacrificed weekends finally meant something. I was proud. I was excited. And like an idiot, I shared the news at our usual Sunday family brunch. I thought they'd be happy for me. I thought wrong. The moment I mentioned the promotion, the entire energy at the table shifted. My mother Patricia went silent, her smile freezing on her face like ice forming over a lake. My older sister Claudette, who was 37 and had always been the golden child, the successful one, the one Mom bragged about to everyone, suddenly found her phone very interesting. She wouldn't look at me. My younger brother Roderick, 28 years old and working retail, unfriended me on social media that same afternoon. I know, because I checked. My father Vincent just sat there, saying nothing, looking uncomfortable but refusing to take any side at all, which is what had always done when conflict arose in our family. What I didn't understand at first was that my promotion had shattered the carefully constructed hierarchy our family had operated under my entire life. Claudette worked as an insurance agent making about $70,000 a year. She was comfortable, stable, and most importantly to my mother, she was the success story. I was supposed to be the other daughter, the one who tried hard but never quite measured up, the one whose struggles made Claudette look even better by comparison. Growing up, Patricia had constantly compared us. When Claudette made honor roll, Mom threw a party. When I made honor roll, she said it was nice but reminded me that Claudette had done it first and better. When Claudette got her first job, it was celebrated as the beginning of a brilliant career. When I got my first job, Mom asked if I was sure I could handle the responsibility. Every achievement of mine was diminished. Every achievement of Claudette's was amplified. I learned early that my role in the family was to be less than, to make my sister shine brighter. After that Sunday brunch, my family stopped contacting me entirely. I tried reaching out. I sent birthday cards to my mother in July. They went unanswered. I invited everyone to Thanksgiving at my new apartment. Nobody responded. I called my father 3 times trying to talk. He let it go to voicemail each time. The silence was deliberate and cruel, and it hurt more than I want to admit. For 32 years I'd been trying to earn their love, their approval, their recognition. Now that I'd finally achieved something meaningful, they punished me for it. I spent months wondering what I'd done wrong, replaying that brunch in my mind, trying to figure out where I'd messed up. Should I have downplayed the promotion? Should I have lied about the salary? Should I have just kept quiet about the one good thing that had happened to me? Then, 1 week before Christmas, my phone buzzed with a text from Claudette. The message was overly sweet, dripping with fake warmth. She said she'd been thinking about family, about how the holidays should bring people together, about healing old wounds and moving forward. She said she missed me. She said Mom and Dad missed me too. She said everyone wanted to have Christmas dinner together at the Sterling House, a fancy restaurant downtown, and it would mean so much if I came. She used phrases like new beginning and turning over a new leaf and what family is really about. I wanted so badly to believe her. I wanted so badly to think that maybe time had helped, that maybe they'd realized pushing me away was wrong, that maybe Christmas magic had softened their hearts. I texted back saying I'd be there. Claudette responded with a heart emoji and can't wait to see you. Now, standing in that restaurant, looking at 12 people who wouldn't meet my eyes, I realized I'd walked straight into a trap. And the worst part was, some part of me had known it all along but chose hope over wisdom. I made my way to the table slowly, my heart already starting to pound with anxiety. The table was set beautifully with white linens and red roses, Christmas decorations scattered among the place settings, candles flickering. It should have been warm and welcoming. Instead, it felt like walking toward a firing squad. As I got closer, I could count exactly who was there. My parents, Patricia and Vincent at the center, like a king and queen holding court. Claudette sat beside Mom with her husband Marshall, a car salesman who always acted like he was more successful than he actually was. Roderick was there with his girlfriend Paige, a quiet woman I'd only met twice. My Aunt Loretta and Uncle Bernard took up 2 seats, both of them already looking flushed from alcohol. My cousins Iris and Daphne were giggling together, whispering behind their hands. And at the head of the table sat my grandmother Mabel, 93 years old and sharp as ever, watching everything with calculating eyes. 12 people total, including me, and I was seated at the very end of the table, as far from my parents as physically possible, like I was some distant acquaintance rather than their daughter. What hit me immediately was that everyone already had drinks, multiple rounds based on the number of empty glasses scattered around. The appetizer plates told an even more expensive story. Oysters on the half-shell, lobster bisque in delicate porcelain bowls, a caviar service with all the accompaniments. These weren't the kind of appetizers you ordered casually. These were statement dishes, the kind that cost $40 or $50 each. The waiter hovered near me specifically, I noticed, glancing at me every few seconds like he was waiting for something. Then Claudette's voice rang out across the table, loud and deliberate, making sure everyone including nearby tables could hear. She said, "Don't worry about prices tonight, everyone. Order whatever your heart's desire. This is a very special occasion." She emphasized those last words, and I saw Marshall smirk beside her. My stomach started to turn. The fake pleasantries began almost immediately. My mother Patricia looked at me with a tight smile and asked how my little job was going, emphasizing the word little in a way that made it clear she didn't consider my position impressive at all. My father Vincent launched into a long story about his retirement plans, discussing finances and investments and trips he wanted to take, never once asking about my life or what I'd been doing for the past 8 months. Claudette dominated the conversation with stories about Marshall's recent big sale, a car commission that had earned him $3,000. She talked about it like he'd closed $1 million deal, like they were living some wealthy lifestyle, preening and showing off. Marshall played along, talking about the luxury vehicle he'd sold, describing every feature in exhausting detail. Roderick complained about his retail job, how the hours were long and the pay was terrible, how he could barely make ends meet. He kept glancing at me while he said this, like he was setting up something. Then I heard my cousin Iris whisper to Daphne, loud enough that I could just barely catch it. She said, "Is she really paying for all this?" Daphne giggled in response and whispered back, "Claudette said she's loaded now. She can afford it." The words hit me like cold water. My blood went cold, my hands started shaking. I looked around the table with new eyes and suddenly everything made horrible sense. The expensive restaurant, the premium appetizers already ordered, the fancy drinks flowing freely, the 12 people gathered here. None of them actually wanted to reconcile with me. None of them missed me. None of them cared about healing our family. They wanted a free expensive meal, and they wanted me to pay for it. They'd orchestrated this entire evening as a way to use me, to take advantage of my salary, to punish me for succeeding by forcing me to fund their night of indulgence. Part of me wanted to stand up right then and walk out, to leave them sitting there with their expensive orders and their cruel intentions. But another part of me, the part that had spent 32 years desperately seeking their approval, couldn't do it. Some pathetic corner of my heart still hoped I was wrong, still hoped that maybe the whisper was a joke, that maybe once we got talking they'd actually show some genuine interest in my life. So I stayed. I picked up the menu and ordered a simple chicken dish for myself, something modest that cost $28, while everyone around me ordered premium steaks, seafood towers, and the most expensive wines on the menu. The waiter wrote it all down, and I noticed he kept glancing at me with something that might have been pity. He knew what was happening. Had probably seen it before. Family members setting up one person to foot the bill. He brought the drinks, cleared the appetizer plates, and kept refilling everyone's wine glasses except mine. I hadn't ordered any alcohol. I needed to stay clear-headed because my instincts were screaming that this night was going to get much worse before it got better. The wine kept flowing, and with it, the masks started slipping. My family ordered 3 more bottles of expensive wine, $200 each according to the menu I'd glanced at. They didn't ask anyone if they wanted to share the cost, just ordered them like money was no object, which was easy to do when you assumed someone else was paying. My grandmother Mabel was getting visibly drunk, her face flushed, her movements exaggerated. She looked at me with unfocused eyes and said, "Must be nice having all that money while your sister struggles to make ends meet." The table went quiet for a second. Claudette's face arranged itself into an expression of fake sympathy, but I could see the satisfaction underneath. She was enjoying this. Marshall decided to join in, leaning back in his chair like he was holding court. He said, "Yeah, some people get lucky with their careers, and some people actually work hard for every dollar." The implication was clear. My success wasn't earned. It was luck. And their struggles were somehow more noble because they involved effort. Then Uncle Bernard decided it was his turn to take a shot at me. He said, "So Bethany, when are you getting married? Or are you too busy with your career for that?" "Oh wait, I forgot, you're one of those career women. That's kind of sad, isn't it?" Aunt Loretta nodded along enthusiastically, adding that career women always end up alone and miserable, that a woman's real fulfillment comes from family and children, not some job. I bit my tongue, trying not to respond. But the attacks kept coming. Roderick said, "Remember when Bethany couldn't even pass algebra in high school, and now she's supposedly some big-shot executive? How does that even happen?" The way he said it suggested I must have slept my way to the top, or cheated somehow, or that the promotion was some kind of mistake that would eventually be corrected. Every accomplishment I'd worked for was being dismissed, minimized, reframed as suspicious or undeserved. Claudette launched into a long performance about her own life, painting herself as a martyr who'd sacrificed everything. She talked about working through college, about supporting Marshall when he was between jobs, about all the hard decisions Shed made and the struggles Shed endured. She kept contrasting her story with mine, saying things like, "Some of us had to earn everything the hard way. Some of us didn't have things handed to us. Some of us built our lives through real sacrifice." The implication was that I hadn't worked hard, hadn't struggled, hadn't earned anything. My family nodded along to every word, validating her narrative, treating her version of reality as truth. I tried to defend myself, tried to explain that I'd worked 80-hour weeks to get that promotion, that I'd led a campaign that earned the company $2 million in revenue, that I hadn't been handed anything. Claudette cut me off before I could finish, rolling her eyes and saying, "Oh, here we go, poor Bethany, always playing the victim, always trying to make herself sound important." When I tried to share specific achievements, Marshall scoffed loudly. He said, "Sure you did all that by yourself. I'm sure you had nothing to do with a team or other people's work, you just single-handedly saved the company." His sarcasm was thick and cruel. Every attempt I made to stand up for myself was shut down, mocked, or twisted. The waiter appeared again, and this time he was carrying a black leather bill folder. He walked directly to me, not to the center of the table, not to my father, but to me specifically, and placed it in front of my plate. I didn't open it, but I could see numbers through the semi-transparent paper. The total so far was $1,800, and we hadn't even received the main courses yet. My heart was hammering. My face felt hot. I could feel everyone watching me, waiting to see what I'd do. This was the moment they'd been building toward. The moment where I was supposed to meekly accept the bill and pay for everyone's indulgence without complaint. I realized with crystal clarity that this entire dinner was designed to humiliate me, to punish me for daring to be successful, to put me back in my place as the lesser daughter who existed to serve the golden child's ego. The main courses arrived on oversized white plates, each one a work of art that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Everyone had ordered the most expensive items on the menu. Claudette's Wagyu beef looked like it had been painted onto the plate, $48 for 8 ounces of meat. Marshall had ordered a whole Maine lobster with drawn butter, the price tag somewhere north of $60. Uncle Bernard's king crab legs came piled high, easily another $70. Aunt Loretta's surf and turf combined steak and lobster tail for $85. My cousins had both ordered premium cuts of filet mignon. Even Roderick and his girlfriend Paige had gone for expensive seafood dishes. My grandmother Mabel was working on a lamb chop preparation that cost $55. My parents had both ordered special preparations that weren't even listed on the regular menu, probably well over $100 each. And then there was my plate. My simple roasted chicken looked absolutely pathetic in comparison, like I was a child at the adult table who didn't deserve real food. Claudette made a theatrical show of cutting into her steak, closing her eyes, and making exaggerated sounds of pleasure. She said, "Oh my God, this is absolutely incredible. This is the best steak I've ever had in my entire life." Then she looked at me with fake concern and said, "Oh, honey, you should have ordered something nice, something really special. You can afford it after all." She offered me a bite of her steak in the most condescending way possible, like she was doing charity work, like I was some poor unfortunate who needed her generosity. I declined. I could barely eat my own food. My stomach was in knots. But then something happened that made everything so much worse. Roderick, who'd been relatively quiet during the main course, suddenly cleared his throat and said he needed to talk about something serious. He said he was behind on rent, that his landlord was threatening eviction, that he needed $2,000 immediately or he'd be out on the street by New Year's. He looked directly at me when he said it, his eyes pleading but also entitled, like my help was expected and owed. Before I could respond, Aunt Loretta jumped in with her own crisis. She said her car needed major repairs, something about the transmission failing completely, and she couldn't afford the $4,000 repair bill. She was a single mother, she reminded everyone, and without her car she couldn't get to work, couldn't take care of her kids, would lose everything. Cousin Iris was next. She needed $3,000 for college tuition, she said, because education was important and she was so close to finishing her degree. One by one, like a choreographed performance, every person at that table presented a financial emergency. Uncle Bernard needed $5,000 for dental work. Cousin Daphne wanted $6,000 to start a business. Even my grandmother, Mabel, claimed she needed $1,000 for prescription medications that Medicare wouldn't cover. I sat there in stunned silence as they each presented their case, and suddenly I understood with horrible clarity what this dinner really was. This wasn't just about making me pay for one expensive meal. This was an ambush designed to extract money from me on an ongoing basis. They'd coordinated this entire thing, planned out their sob stories, calculated exactly how much they could squeeze out of me. Then my mother Patricia stood up slightly, her face arranged in an expression of serious concern, and she pulled out a handwritten list from her purse. She said, "Bethany, honey, we need to discuss something important as a family." She proceeded to go through the list. Every person's name, their financial need, the amount required, reading it like it was a budget proposal at a business meeting. When she finished, the total came to $21,000. $21,000 that they expected me to just hand over because we shared DNA. My mother's voice took on that manipulative tone I knew so well from childhood, the one that made you feel guilty for existing. She said, "We're family, Bethany, and family helps family. Blood is thicker than water. We were there for you growing up. We sacrificed so much to raise you, and now it's your turn to give back." My father Vincent added his guilt trip. talking about how Head worked 2 jobs when we were kids, how Mom had given up her career dreams to raise us, how they'd sacrificed everything and what did they have to show for it. He said he was very disappointed in the woman I'd become if I couldn't see my way to helping the people who'd given me life. Then Claudette stood up dramatically, her chair scraping against the floor, commanding everyone's attention. She said, "Here's the deal, Bethany. Here's how this works. You write checks to everyone at this table tonight. You help your family the way family is supposed to help each other, or you're dead to us." She let that threat hang in the air for a moment before continuing. She said they'd tell everyone I'd abandoned my family, turned my back on my own blood when they needed me most, that I was selfish and cold and cared more about money than people. Nobody would speak to me again, she promised. I'd have no family at all. The entire table went silent, everyone staring at me, waiting for me to crumble under the pressure. They expected me to pull out my checkbook with tears in my eyes, to apologize for making them ask, to gratefully accept this opportunity to prove my worth by funding their lives. I could see it in their faces. Claudette was smirking with barely concealed triumph. Marshall was nudging her with his elbow like they'd already won. My mother was mentally spending the money, probably planning what she'd buy first. Roderick was calculating which gaming console he'd purchase once he had my cash in hand. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I was still that desperate little girl who'd do anything for their approval. So I did what they expected. I reached slowly for my purse, moving deliberately, letting the tension build at the table. I could see relief washing over their faces. They thought they'd won. But instead of pulling out my checkbook, I pulled out my phone. I said, "I have something to show everyone before I make any decisions." My voice was steady and calm, which surprised me because inside I was shaking with rage. Claudette looked annoyed at the delay, saying, "Bethany, just write the checks. We don't have time for games." But I ignored her. I pulled out my tablet from my bag, the one I'd brought specifically for this moment because some part of me had known, had suspected, had prepared. I connected my phone to the tablet and held up the screen for the entire table to see. What they didn't know was that 20 minutes earlier, I'd excused myself to go to the bathroom, needing a moment alone to process the nightmare unfolding around me. I'd been standing in the stall with my hands shaking, trying to decide what to do, when my phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from Roderick. The message preview said, "She's totally falling for it just like Claudette said she would." My stomach dropped to the floor. I opened the text and stared at it for a full 10 seconds before my brain could process what I was seeing. Then, as I watched, the message disappeared. Head unsent it. Head realized his mistake and tried to take it back. But it was too late. I'd seen it. Head accidentally sent a message meant for some other group chat directly to me instead. My hands were shaking as I realized what this meant. There was a group chat. A conversation I wasn't part of. A place where my family was discussing me, discussing this dinner, discussing their plan. I needed to see it. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. That's when I remembered that Roderick's girlfriend Paige had left her phone on the table when she went to the bathroom before me. I walked out of the stall, washed my hands, and when I returned to the table area, I glanced around. Paige was still in the bathroom. Her phone was sitting on the table near her empty seat. I made a split-second decision that I knew was wrong but felt absolutely necessary. I grabbed Paige's phone and walked back toward the bathroom hallway, where I'd be out of sight but could still seem like I was just taking my time. Paige's phone wasn't locked, just a simple swipe to open. And there on her screen was a group chat called Christmas Plan. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I opened the chat and started scrolling, and what I found was so much worse than I'd imagined. The conversation went back 3 weeks, hundreds of messages, every single one of them about me and how to manipulate me. 3 weeks ago, Claudette had written, "I have an idea for how to take Bethany down and get money out of her at the same time." My mother had responded, "I'm listening, tell me more." Claudette laid out the entire plan. They'd invite me to an expensive Christmas dinner, make me think they wanted reconciliation, then stick me with the bill and use the moment to demand ongoing financial support. Roderick had asked, "So we just embarrass her in public and then ask for cash?" Claudette had written back, "Better than that. We break her down first, make her desperate for our approval, then offer acceptance in exchange for money. I kept scrolling, my horror growing with each message. 2 weeks ago, they'd been planning specific insults to use against me. They'd assigned roles like actors in a play. Uncle Bernard would attack my relationship status. Aunt Loretta would question my worth as a woman. Roderick would imply I didn't deserve my success. Grandmother Mabel would make comments about money and privilege. Each attack was designed to chip away at my confidence, to make me feel small and desperate. Claudette had written, "We need to make her feel worthless so she'll do anything to win us back." My mother had agreed, saying, "Then when she's vulnerable, we hit her with the money demands, and she'll pay just to feel like part of the family again." 1 week before Christmas, they'd discussed the specific amounts each person would request. The total they'd planned to extract wasn't just for this one night. They wanted $17,000 immediately, with plans to come back for more later. Claudette had written, "She makes $120,000 a year. She can definitely afford it, and if she really cared about family, she'd be happy to help." My father had asked, "What if she says no?" Claudette's response made my blood boil. She'd written, "Then we threaten to cut her off permanently. We tell her she's selfish and ungrateful. We make sure she knows that choosing money over family makes her a terrible person. We gaslight her until she breaks." The day before Christmas, they'd confirmed everyone knew their parts. Roderick had written, "This feels kind of harsh. Are we sure about this?" And Claudette had responded, "She deserves every bit of it for rubbing her success in my face, for making me look bad, for getting a better job than me when I'm the one who's supposed to be successful." My mother had added, "She's always been selfish, putting her career first, not thinking about family. This will teach her that family comes first, that we come first, that she owes us." But the messages that hurt most were the ones where they mocked me personally. They'd joked about my appearance, called me plain and forgettable. They'd made fun of my personality, calling me boring and desperate. They'd laughed about how I'd probably cry during dinner. Claudette had written, "I bet she'll cry. She always was weak, always too emotional. That's why she'll never really be successful. People like her don't have what it takes." They'd placed bets on whether it'd actually pay. Marshall had written, "She'll pay. She's too much of a pushover not to." They'd called me an easy mark, a desperate loser, someone so pathetically hungry for family approval that it'd do anything, pay anything, accept any abuse just for a scrap of belonging. I took screenshots of everything. Every cruel message, every calculated plan, every mocking joke, every manipulation tactic. I sent them all to my own phone, then carefully deleted the evidence from Pyga's device that I'd accessed the chat. I put her phone back exactly where I'd found it. Then I stood in that restaurant bathroom staring at myself in the mirror, and something fundamental shifted inside me. I'd spent 32 years trying to earn love from these people. 32 years trying to be good enough, trying to make them proud, trying to deserve their affection. And now I had proof, undeniable evidence, that they were incapable of loving me. They didn't see me as a daughter, a sister, a family member. They saw me as a resource to exploit. They saw my success as a threat to their egos and an opportunity to extract money. They'd weaponized my deepest need for belonging against me. I texted my coworker Russell, someone who'd become a real friend over the past year. I explained briefly what was happening. He responded immediately, said he was 20 minutes away and bringing backup. I texted my boss Harriet, who'd always been supportive. She responded with fury on my behalf, said nobody treats her best employee like that. Then I did something I'd never done before. I decided I was done trying to be the bigger person. Done turning the other cheek. Done hoping they'd change. These people had shown me exactly who they were, and I was finally ready to believe them. I was going to walk back to that table, and I was going to burn their plan to the ground. Standing in that bathroom, I forced myself to breathe slowly and think strategically. My hands were shaking, but my mind was becoming clearer with each passing second. They'd planned this attack for weeks. They'd coordinated every detail. They'd treated my manipulation like a fun family project. Well, two could play that game, and they'd just handed me every weapon I needed. I pulled up the screenshots on my phone and studied them again, making sure I understood the full scope of their betrayal. Then I started planning my response. I wasn't going to just walk out. That's what they'd expect if things went wrong. They'd spin it as me being dramatic, difficult, proving their point that I was selfish. No, I was going to expose them publicly, methodically, using their own words against them. I texted Russell again with more details. He responded that he was bringing 2 other colleagues from our office, people who'd heard about my family situation and wanted to support me. Having witnesses mattered. It meant I wouldn't be alone, wouldn't be outnumbered, wouldn't be as easy to gaslight and manipulate. I checked the restaurant's policies quickly on my phone. According to their website, bills could be split among parties, and they had fraud protection if someone was tricked into paying under false pretenses. The group chat messages constituted clear evidence of fraud. They'd lured me here under false pretenses with intent to deceive. That wasn't just mean, it was potentially illegal. I looked at my bank accounts on my phone. Yes, I made good money now. But I wasn't wealthy. I still had $50,000 in student loans that I was aggressively paying down. I was saving for a house down payment, had $12,000 in that fund so far. I was supporting myself completely, with no help from anyone. A $3,000 dinner would devastate my carefully planned budget. It would set back my house savings by months. And that wasn't even counting the $17,000 they wanted to extract beyond the meal. They hadn't bothered to ask about my financial situation. They just assumed that because I earned more than them, I was swimming in expendable cash. They didn't know or care that higher salary often came with higher expenses, that I lived in an expensive city, that I was building a real future for myself. I gave myself a pep talk in that bathroom mirror. I remembered every time they'd made me feel small growing up. Every time Claudette got praise while I got criticism for the same achievement. Every time my mother compared us, and I came up short. Every time my father stayed silent when I needed him to defend me. Every time I'd been told I wasn't good enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't successful enough. Every time I'd believed them and internalized that I was somehow less than. I thought about working 3 jobs through college because my parents helped Claudette financially, but told me I needed to learn independence. I thought about every sacrifice I'd made, every hour I'd worked, every goal I'd achieved through my own effort. They wanted to use my success to fund their failures. Instead, they were about to learn that success had given me something more valuable than money. It had given me confidence. It had given me options. It had given me the strength to finally walk away. I made a decision standing there. I would not pay that bill. I would not give them a single dollar. I would expose their group chat in front of everyone. I would let them face the consequences of their own cruelty. I would walk away from them permanently, not in anger but in clarity. I would stop chasing the approval of people fundamentally incapable of giving it. And then I would build a life surrounded by people who actually valued me, not for what I could provide but for who I was. The decision felt like shedding a heavy coat I'd been wearing my whole life without realizing it. I felt lighter, clearer, free. I composed myself, checked my appearance one more time, and walked back to the table with my head high and my phone in my hand. They didn't notice anything different about me. They were too drunk, too satisfied with their perceived victory, too busy enjoying their expensive food. I sat down quietly and watched them for a moment. Really watched them, saw them with new eyes. These people who I'd called family my whole life. These people who I'd loved desperately and unconditionally. These people who'd never once loved me back the same way. Claudette was laughing too loud, showing off. My mother was holding court like a queen. My father was quietly eating, avoiding eye contact with everyone as always. Roderick was on his phone, probably in that group chat making fun of me in real time. And all of them, every single one, truly believed they were entitled to my money, my success, my resources, simply because we shared genetics. The dessert menus arrived with theatrical flair, presented by 2 waiters working in coordination. The desserts at the Sterling House weren't just food, they were experiences, and they were priced accordingly. $15 to $25 per item. Everyone grabbed a menu enthusiastically. Claudette ordered 3 desserts for herself, saying she wanted to try everything. Marshall ordered the most expensive chocolate souffle that took 20 minutes to prepare. My cousins each ordered elaborate presentations involving multiple components. Even my grandmother ordered 2 items. The waiter looked at me expectantly, but I shook my head. I wasn't eating another bite in this place. As the dessert orders were being taken, Marshall suddenly proclaimed loudly, making sure nearby tables could hear, "This is the best meal I've ever had in my entire life. Thank God someone here can afford to treat the family to something special." The emphasis on someone and the way he looked at me made it crystal clear who he meant. Then my mother Patricia cleared her throat in that particular way that meant she was about to say something important, something everyone needed to listen to. She said, "Bethany, honey, before dessert comes, we need to have a serious family discussion." She pulled out that handwritten list again, this time placing it on the table between us like it was a contract. She said this was about family obligations, about what we owed each other, about how success wasn't meant to be hoarded but shared. She went through the list systematically, each person's name, their financial crisis, the exact amount needed, and a guilt-laden explanation of why it was urgent. Roderick went first with his rent situation. He claimed he was $2,000 behind and facing eviction in 1 week. His eyes were pleading as he looked at me, but I now knew from the group chat that Head actually spent his rent money on a new gaming setup, a fact Head bragged about in messages while planning to lie to me about it. Aunt Loretta delivered her pitch about the car transmission, with tears in her eyes. She was a single mother, she reminded me, and without transportation she couldn't work, couldn't take her kids to school, would lose everything. It was a compelling story, except I'd seen her social media posts from 2 weeks ago, showing her on a beach in Cancun with her new boyfriend, a vacation that must have cost at least $2,000. Cousin Iris pleaded for college tuition money, $3,000 to stay enrolled. She talked about how education was an investment in the future, how she was so close to her degree. The only problem was, Iris was 31 years old and hadn't been enrolled in any school for 10 years. I knew this because I'd asked about her graduation last year and been told she'd dropped out ages ago. Each story was crafted to pull at heartstrings. Each request was framed as dire and urgent, but every single one was built on lies. They weren't in crisis. They were opportunists who'd decided my salary was their lottery ticket. Uncle Bernard needed $5,000 for emergency dental work, claiming he was in constant pain and couldn't eat properly. Cousin Daphne wanted $6,000 to start a business, painting herself as an entrepreneur who just needed one break to succeed. My grandmother Mabel, at 93, claimed Medicare wouldn't cover her prescriptions, and she needed $1,000 or shed to have to choose between medicine and food. The total kept climbing. $21,000. More than I'd saved for my house down payment. More than I'd paid toward my student loans in the past year. They were asking me to hand over the equivalent of months of my financial progress so they could continue living beyond their means while resenting my success. My mother Patricia pulled out her most powerful manipulation tool, tears. Her voice cracked as she said, "We're family, Bethany. We're your blood. We're the people who will always be there for you." She said that blood was thicker than water, that family bonds were sacred, that we took care of our own. She reminded me that she and Vincent had been there for me growing up, that they'd fed me and clothed me and put a roof over my head. She said now it was my turn to give back, to show gratitude, to prove I hadn't forgotten where I came from. My father Vincent added his guilt trip in his quiet way. He talked about working 2 jobs when we were kids, coming home exhausted every night, sacrificing time with his family to provide for us. He talked about my mother giving up her career dreams to be a stay-at-home mom. He said they'd given up so much for us, and if I couldn't see my way to helping when they needed it, he was very disappointed in the person I'd become. Then Claudette stood up with dramatic flair, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Every eye in the restaurant turned toward our table. She said, "Let me make this very clear, Bethany, because you seem confused about how family works." Her voice was sharp and cold. She said, "You have 2 choices tonight. Choice 1. You write checks to everyone at this table for the amounts we've discussed. You help your family the way family is supposed to help each other, and we move forward together. Choice 2. You refuse. You prove that money is more important to you than blood, and you're dead to us." She paused for effect. She said they'd tell everyone, every extended family member, every family friend, everyone in our community, that I'd abandoned my family in their time of need. She said I'd be known as the selfish sister who got a little bit of money and thought she was too good for her own family. She said no one would speak to me again, that I'd be completely alone, that I'd have no family at all. She said I'd regret it for the rest of my life. The entire restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners were openly staring now. The waitstaff had stopped moving. Everyone was watching to see what would happen next. My family sat there, every one of them staring at me with expressions ranging from expectation to hostility. They truly believed they had me cornered. They truly believed I was still that desperate little girl who'd do anything to belong. I could see it in their faces. Claudette was smirking with triumph. Certain Shed delivered the killing blow. Marshall was barely containing his satisfaction. My mother's tears were calculated, a weapon Shed used on me my whole life. My father's disappointment was meant to cut deep. Roderick looked uncomfortable but went along with it anyway. The extended family members played their parts perfectly, looking at me with judgment and expectation. Very slowly, very deliberately, I reached for my purse. I moved like I was underwater, drawing out the moment, letting them think they'd won. I could see the relief washing over their faces. Claudette actually smiled. My mother stopped crying and sat up straighter. Vincent nodded like he'd finally done something right. Marshall whispered something to Claudette that made her squeeze his hand. They thought the hard part was over. They thought I was about to write checks and prove once again that I was the family doormat, the one who could be pushed around, the one whose boundaries meant nothing. But instead of pulling out my checkbook, I pulled out my phone. And then I pulled out my tablet from my bag. I connected them quickly, while everyone watched with confusion. I said, my voice steady and calm, "I have something I need to show everyone before I make any decisions about money." Claudette's face flashed with annoyance. She said, "Bethany, stop playing games, just write the checks, we don't have time for your dramatics." But I ignored her. I held up my tablet screen, large enough for everyone at the table to see clearly. On the screen was the group chat. Their group chat. The one called Christmas Plan. The one where they'd spent 3 weeks planning how to manipulate and humiliate me. The one where they'd coordinated their attack like generals planning a military campaign. And I said, voice carrying across the silent restaurant, "This is your family group chat, the one I'm not part of. The one where you've been planning this entire evening for weeks." The explosion happened in slow motion. Roderick's face went completely white as he realized his texting mistake had exposed everything. Claudette's eyes went wide with panic, her mouth opening and closing without sound. My mother Patricia lurched forward trying to grab my phone, nearly knocking over her wine glass, hissing that I had no right to invade their privacy. My father, Vincent, always the peacekeeper, tried a different approach, saying this was all a misunderstanding, that I was taking things out of context, that families sometimes vented privately, and it didn't mean anything. But their words were meaningless now because the evidence was right there on the screen for everyone to see. I started reading messages aloud, my voice clear and steady. I read Claudette's initial plan from 3 weeks ago, her exact words about taking me down and getting money from me. I read my mother's enthusiastic agreement. I read their discussion about assigning roles, about what insults each person would deliver, about how to break me down psychologically before demanding money. I scrolled through and read Roderick's question about whether this was harsh, and Claudette's response that I deserved it for rubbing my success in her face. I read my mother's claim that I'd always been selfish, and this would teach me that family comes first. I read Marshall's bet that I was too much of a pushover not to pay. I read their mocking jokes about my appearance and personality. I read their predictions that I'd probably cry. I read everything. Other restaurant diners had stopped even pretending not to watch. Some were recording on their phones. The waitstaff stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene. My family couldn't deny anything because their words were right there, time-stamped and undeniable. Grandmother Mabel tried to claim she hadn't really participated, that she was just included in the chat but hadn't said those things. But then I scrolled to her messages, calling me ungrateful and saying I needed to be taken down a peg. Aunt Loretta tried to say it was all just jokes, that I was being too sensitive, but her written requests for $4,000 weren't a joke. Uncle Bernard tried to leave, but I asked him loudly to please sit back down because I wasn't finished yet. Then I started my individual call-outs. I looked directly at Claudette and said, "You have been jealous of me our entire lives, not because I had more than you, but because you couldn't handle me having anything at all." I said her golden child status was only golden because I'd been forced to stay beneath her, and the moment I stopped accepting that role, the moment I succeeded on my own terms, she couldn't handle it. I said Shed built her entire identity on being better than me, and my promotion had shattered that illusion. So instead of being happy for me, Shed orchestrated this elaborate scheme to punish me for daring to succeed. I turned to my mother Patricia and asked, "What kind of mother orchestrates the public humiliation of her own daughter?" I said Shed pitted Claudette and me against each other since childhood, that Shed created Claudette's enormous ego and my deep insecurity, that Shed set up a dynamic where only one daughter could be valued at a time. I said everything wrong with our family dynamic started with her need to have a favorite child, with her inability to love both daughters equally, with her constant comparisons that made sure we could never be real sisters. I looked at my father, Vincent, and said, "You stood by and watched Mom create this toxic environment. Your silence made you just as guilty." I said real fathers protected all their children, not just the favorite one, and his unwillingness to ever stand up for me, to ever tell Mom she was wrong, to ever validate my achievements, had shown me exactly how little I mattered to him. I said, had chosen the easy path of peace over the right path of protecting his daughter. To Roderick I said, "You're 28 years old, it's time to stop acting like a victim and take responsibility for your own life." I pointed out that Id worked 3 jobs through college while Head lived at home rent-free. I said his rent problems came from buying a gaming setup instead of paying his bills, and trying to manipulate me into fixing his bad choices was pathetic. Then I started exposing the specific lies one by one. I pulled up Roderick's social media on my phone and showed everyone his posts about his new gaming computer from the same week he claimed he couldn't pay rent. I pulled up Aunt Loretta's vacation photos from Cancun and asked how someone who couldn't afford car repairs had afforded a week at a beach resort. I looked at Iris and said flatly that she was 31 years old and hadn't been enrolled in school for a decade, so the tuition story was completely fabricated. I went through each person's financial crisis and showed how none of them were real emergencies. They were just excuses to extract money from me. Claudette suddenly jumped to her feet, her chair falling backward with a crash. She was screaming now, face red, completely losing control. She yelled that I had no right to snoop through their private conversations, that what I'd done was theft and invasion of privacy, that I was a terrible person for exposing them like this. I responded calmly that Roderick had accidentally sent me a message from the group chat, and once I knew it existed, I'd looked, because I had a right to know what was being planned against me. I said I was glad it investigated because it had saved me from being their ATM. My mother Patricia tried desperately to regain control of the situation. She said we needed to discuss this privately, that we were making a scene, that this wasn't appropriate restaurant behavior. I laughed at that, a sharp, bitter sound. I said, "You wanted to humiliate me publicly. You made this dinner into a performance designed to break me down in front of everyone, and now you're upset that I'm turning it around on you?" I said no. We were doing this publicly, just like they'd planned to shame me publicly. I said I was done protecting them from the consequences of their own cruelty. The other restaurant diners were fully engaged now. I heard one woman say, "Good for her. She should expose them." I heard someone else say, "I can't believe her own family did that." I saw people nodding in agreement as I spoke. The court of public opinion was clearly on my side. My family was being seen for what they really were, manipulative and cruel, and they couldn't stand it. Then Russell arrived. My coworker walked through the restaurant door with 2 other colleagues from our office, all 3 of them dressed professionally, looking competent and supportive. They walked directly to our table, and Russell stood behind my chair, putting a hand on my shoulder. He looked at my family and said, "Is there a problem here?" His tone was protective and challenging. Suddenly my family's power was gone. It wasn't 12 against 1 anymore. I had witnesses. I had support. I had people would stand up for me. They couldn't manipulate the narrative anymore. They couldn't gang up on me and make me feel crazy. The balance had shifted completely. Claudette tried to tell Russell this was a family matter and none of his business, but he responded that when someone ambushes my friend and tries to extort money from her, it becomes my business. My father tried to assert some authority, saying this was between family members, but Russell pointed out that fraud was fraud regardless of family relationships. The restaurant manager appeared, drawn by the commotion. He was a professional man in his 50s who'd probably seen every kind of drama play out in his establishment. He asked if there was a problem, and I explained the situation calmly, showing him the group chat messages as evidence. I explained that I'd been invited here under false pretenses, that my family had planned to manipulate me into paying for an expensive meal and then extort additional money, and that I had written evidence of their premeditation. The manager read through some of the messages, his expression growing more disapproving with each screenshot. He said this appeared to be a case of fraudulent pretenses, that his restaurant didn't appreciate being used as a venue for scams, and that the bill would need to be split equally among all the diners rather than assigned to one person under false assumptions. My family erupted in protest. They said they didn't have that kind of money, that they couldn't afford to pay, that this wasn't fair. The manager responded firmly that they'd ordered the food, they'd consume the food, and they would pay for the food or head to call the police. The word police made everyone go quiet. Claudette's credit card was declined twice, maxed out. Marshall's card went through for $300 before being declined. My parents had to put down $800 between them, nearly emptying their checking account based on my mother's panicked phone call to my father about their balance. It took 40 minutes of scrambling, pooling money, using multiple payment methods, and general chaos before they managed to scrape together the $3,200 total. Each person ended up paying roughly $267 for their share of the meal they'd intended to make me cover entirely. I watched the whole process without saying a word. I didn't gloat. I didn't lecture. I just observed as they faced the consequences of their own choices. Russell and my other colleagues had already called me an Uber that was waiting outside. As my family finished their humiliating payment process, I stood up to leave. My mother grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. She said, "You're really going to do this? You're really going to destroy your family over money?" I removed her hand from my arm carefully and said, "I'm not destroying anything, you already did that." I said I was simply refusing to fund the destruction anymore, refusing to enable their dysfunction, refusing to set myself on fire to keep them warm. Claudette's rage had burned through the panic, and now she was back to screaming. She said I was selfish, ungrateful, that I owed them everything, that they'd given me life and raised me, and I was throwing it all away. I responded that they'd done the bare minimum that parents are legally required to do, that feeding and housing your child isn't a debt the child owes you forever. It's just basic parenting. I said they'd poisoned even those basic provisions with constant criticism and comparison, so they didn't get credit for doing poorly what they were supposed to do well. My father tried his last card, attempting to use his authority as patriarch. He said, "If you walk out that door, don't ever come back. If you choose this path, there's no return. You'll be walking away from your family forever." I looked him in the eyes and said, "That's the first honest thing you've said all night, and yes, I understand completely." I said I wouldn't come back because there was nothing here worth coming back to, that a family that only valued me for my bank account wasn't actually a family at all. Roderick made a weak attempt at an apology, saying he'd been pressured by Claudette to participate, that he didn't really want to hurt me. I told him he was an adult capable of making his own choices, that he'd chosen to participate in humiliating me, and that trying to avoid responsibility now didn't change what he'd done. I said being pressured might explain his behavior, but it didn't excuse it, and I was done accepting explanations in place of actual change. Even my grandmother Mabel tried the age card one last time. She said she was 93 years old and this might be the last time I ever saw her, implying I'd regret walking away when she died. I looked at her sadly and said, then I'll remember you as someone who chose cruelty over kindness at the end of your life, and that's on you, not me. I said Shed had 93 years to learn how to treat people with respect, and Shed chosen not to, so I wasn't going to let her use her age as a weapon against me. I addressed the entire table one final time. I said I'd come to this dinner hoping for reconciliation, hoping that maybe the holidays had softened hearts, hoping we could rebuild something real. Instead, they'd shown me exactly who they were with crystal clarity. And I was thanking them for that clarity because it freed me from wasting any more years chasing their approval. I said I'd spent 32 years trying to earn love from people fundamentally incapable of giving it, but I was done now. I was walking away not in anger but in peace, choosing my own mental health and future over their dysfunction and manipulation. Then I turned and walked out of the Sterling house with Russell and my colleagues flanking me like bodyguards. As I reached the door, I heard applause. Some of the other diners were actually clapping. A woman stopped me and said, "You did the right thing? You deserve so much better than them." The validation from strangers who'd witnessed everything meant more than I could express. I got into the Uber, and as we pulled away from the restaurant, I started crying. But they weren't sad tears. They were relief tears, liberation tears, the tears of someone who'd been carrying an impossible weight and had finally set it down. Christmas morning, I woke up alone in my apartment with no family, no drama, no obligations. I made myself a fancy breakfast with expensive ingredients, something I normally wouldn't splurge on, and I ate slowly while watching snow fall outside my window. The peace I felt was unlike anything I'd experienced before. No anxiety about saying the wrong thing. No walking on eggshells. No bracing for criticism. Just quiet peace. In the days that followed, my mother sent a long, guilt-tripping email that I read once and then blocked. Claudette created fake social media accounts to send me harassing messages, and I blocked each one as it appeared. Extended family members I barely knew reached out to tell me how disappointed they were in me, and I realized they'd only heard my mother's twisted version of events where I was the villain. I didn't defend myself to them. Anyone who believed lies without asking for my side wasn't worth keeping in my life. But I also started building something new. Russell invited me to his New Year's party, where I met his wife Lorraine and their kids Finn and Hazel. They treated me with genuine warmth, asking about my life with real interest, celebrating my career success without resentment. There were no ulterior motives, no manipulation, just real human connection. My boss Harriet checked in regularly, my work colleagues became a support system, and my team took me out for a belated Christmas dinner at a modest restaurant where everyone paid their own way. There was more genuine laughter and joy in that simple meal than there'd been in the entire holiday disaster at the Sterling house. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Ramona, who helped me work through the childhood trauma I'd been carrying. I learned that I'd been trauma bonded to my family, accepting their treatment because it was all I'd known. I learned that love shouldn't hurt, that real family celebrates your success rather than resenting it, that setting boundaries isn't cruel but necessary for survival. I understood that their inability to love me properly had never been my fault, that nothing I could have done differently would have changed them because the problem was never me. Without my family constantly demanding money and emotional energy, my life improved dramatically. I paid down my student loans aggressively, saved $15,000 for my house fund in 6 months, invested in my retirement, bought myself things I wanted without guilt. My success was mine to enjoy, not theirs to claim. 6 months after that Christmas dinner, I bought a modest house in a good neighborhood. I hosted a housewarming party with real friends, Russell's family, work colleagues, neighbors I'd gotten to know, people from my book club and gym. The house was full of people who genuinely celebrated this achievement with me. No jealousy, no resentment, just happiness for my happiness. The lessons I learned became fundamental to who I was. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes family is the people who choose to love you without conditions. Blood relatives can be toxic, and it's okay to walk away from toxicity even when it wears a family label. You can't negotiate with people who view your existence as competition. Self-preservation isn't selfish. Your success doesn't need to be justified or apologized for. Real love celebrates your wins. Fake love resents them. Through a mutual acquaintance, I heard that Claudette's marriage was struggling because Marshall was tired of her constant bitterness. She was apparently still obsessed with me, checking my social media compulsively, unable to move on. Shed built a prison of her own jealousy and locked herself inside. My mother tried calling from different numbers, but I blocked them all. She showed up at my office once, but security escorted her out. She played the victim to anyone who'd listen. But Shed lost her daughter because she couldn't accept that daughter's success. And Shed never take accountability for that. I got promoted again, from director to vice president, salary jumping to $160,000. I met someone, a kind man named Graham, who celebrated my achievements and supported my goals. I mentored young women at my company who faced family pressure to stay small. I turned my painful experience into purpose, starting an online support group for adult children of narcissistic parents. My story went viral when I shared it anonymously, and thousands of people related, sharing their own experiences of family trauma. I realized this wasn't just my story. It was a common epidemic of families that couldn't handle one member's success. 1 year after that Christmas dinner, I spent the holiday hosting dinner for my chosen family. Russell's family, Graham, my work friends, my therapist, Dr. Ramona, all gathered in my new house. Everyone brought a dish. We shared costs, and the laughter was genuine. There was no manipulation, no walking on eggshells, no wondering when the other shoe would drop. Just people who cared about each other enjoying a meal together. It was everything that Christmas dinner should have been, but my blood family could never provide. 2 years later, I saw my mother in a grocery store. She looked older, defeated, tired. She started to approach me, and I simply turned and walked in the other direction. Not with anger, not with hatred, just with complete indifference. She called after me, but I didn't turn around. The checkout clerk asked if that was someone I knew, and I said, "Not anymore." Those 2 words felt like freedom. The true victory wasn't revenge or apologies that never came. The victory was building a life without them, finding real love and real family, succeeding without their approval, being happy despite their absence. The victory was forgiving myself for wanting their love in the first place, understanding that children naturally crave their parents' approval and that need wasn't weakness, it was human. The victory was understanding that their inability to love me properly was their failure, not mine. Some families are gardens that nurture growth. Others are weeds that strangle potential. Knowing the difference is wisdom. Acting on that knowledge is courage. I found both, and in doing so, I found peace. If your family only values you for what you provide rather than who you are, you have permission to walk away. You deserve people who celebrate your wins instead of resenting them. Success isn't something you should ever apologize for. And manipulation disguised as love is still manipulation, no matter who's doing it. So now I want to hear from you, because I know I'm not alone in this experience. Have you ever had family members try to use you for money? Have you dealt with relatives who resented your success instead of celebrating it? Drop your story in the comments below because sharing these experiences helps all of us feel less alone. Hit that like button if this story resonated with you. If you've ever had to set boundaries with toxic family members, if you understand what it's like to choose your peace over their presence, subscribe to this channel for more real stories about navigating difficult family dynamics, setting boundaries, and building the life you deserve. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to walk away from family that hurts you. Your mental health matters more than maintaining relationships that destroy you. Thank you for listening to my story, for being here, for understanding that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is choose ourselves. I hope wherever you are in your own journey, whether you're still trapped in a toxic family dynamic or you've already broken free, you know that you deserve love that doesn't hurt. You deserve family that builds you up instead of tearing you down. You deserve to succeed without punishment. And you deserve peace. Happy holidays to everyone who's building their own chosen family this year, to everyone who's celebrating with people who actually love them. You're not alone. We're building something better together, one boundary at a time.